Society. Before we get going, in order to minimize walking, we did bring cinnamon rolls today for anybody that's interested. They're over there with a plate, fork, and napkin. I'd ask you to get those now so you don't interrupt our presentation, but please feel free to have one. I'm Bob Keeshan, the president. We've got a great board this year and a great number of programs. I want to talk about future programs, and then I'll introduce our speaker that we're fortunate to have. Next week, February.
Okay. What did it say when you held your thing over it?
Back on video
down there.
Desktop video television, which was developed here in Topeka. February 11th is Super Bowl weekend, and we are not having a meeting then. I appreciate all the Chiefs fans coming out.
Click on your box up there so you're where you're supposed to know. You're to make it.
We have Chris Ridley from Washburn Rural on Washburn Rural sports figures over the years. February 25th, we have Pete Stauffer to talk about Stauffer Communications and his family's influence in Topeka.
Unless you click.
We're still working on March 13th. And for those that are on the Zoom, please mute yourself. Bob has to do it. Thank you, Bob. March 10th.
Okay, he's apparently got
Itwood, who has a presentation on old Topeka schools, school districts, and buildings. March 17th is a show and tell where you can bring historic items and share them and tell about them. I can't wait to see what Lisa Sandmeyer brings us from Topeka Cemetery, and I'm sure it'll be fascinating. March 24th, we have Steve Dodson. For those of you that are baseball fans, he is the son of Lee Dodson, a longtime Washburn baseball figure and major league player who's going to talk about baseball in Topeka and Shawnee County. All of those are at 3 o'clock unless we say otherwise. Right here. And they will be Zoomed if you have some other engagements. Today, we are fortunate to have Kendall Gott from Leavenworth, which is an equally historic town. Encourage people to visit that if you ever have. A lot of history there. Kendall is in the military or was in the military, served variety of terms. He served in the Middle East, and he's a prolific author who's written about Civil War up to serving in the Middle East and Middle East conflicts. And I think there was even a tanks in urban combat, which is particularly timely now. What I was interested in is he has a couple of books, Gone to Kansas, 1855, and Gone to Kansas, 1856, two different books. And we have the Ritchie House, which started as a dugout in 1855 and then was constructed during that time period. He has also written two historical books, which I asked him today to bring for potential sale, but he's in the process of moving and his furniture hasn't arrived, but boxes are there and he hadn't found them, but hopefully we'll be able to get them back. We're fortunate to have him here because apparently he came from Illinois today for this presentation, but he has written Steamboat Sessions and Backwater Battles, a river pilot on the Western rivers in the Civil War, a historical novel, and he's also written Steamboat Seasons, Dawn of a New Era. For some reason, I had difficulty getting the first with interlibrary loan, but I read the second, which I got on interlibrary loan from Weston. I'm going to tell him I want to buy two books. I'll pay him today, get them at some point in time, read them, and then donate them to the public library. But I encourage you, if you're interested, to talk to him at the end of this about getting a book. Without further ado, I give you Kendall Gott.
Well, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure to be asked to come out here. Normally you try to start these things off with some kind of witty adventure story or something. I don't really have one. I am running on caffeine and nicotine. And look forward late tonight to throw a little alcohol on top of it. Process of moving for the last month. We're living in boxes. Furniture came Friday. It's not in it. None of it's where it's supposed to be. I found some pants in a box. I got that going for you. But it's great to be back in the sun-blessed warmth of the Kansas heartland. I'll ask this right off. How many native Kansas you have? Yay, good for you. How many are like me? I got here as soon as I can and stayed as long as I could. All right. Okay, any Missourians here? You know how they sneak across the border, particularly at voting time. Bob, are we ready on that PowerPoint?
We are.
Okay. This is highly dependent. If we hit that icon at the very top, it looks like on the screen. Go back. Up to the left, to the left, to the left, to the right, to the right. See, it looks like they're there. Hit that. There you go. Okay. With the dead of winter upon us here, it was real nice to have this topic here. It's a nice, friendly, happy topic. Steamboats on the Kansas River. Originally I had this spelled with a Z, like a lot of the old Kansas things. I couldn't figure out how to spell Kansas for a while. Anybody speak Latin? Usually a Catholic or two, though, get this straight. Navigantes flumina per aspero. Navigating upstream through difficulty. So,
Per aspero we know.
and the Kansas River, I mean, it snakes right through our beloved state and seemed to have a lot of potential. But in 1855, there's a newspaper man in St. Louis that didn't quite think so. I didn't do that, but I did. I normally don't read these things, but I'm going to read this because sites and angles and all that. This is from the St. Louis Democrat, November 18th, 1855. The bed of the Kansas River, like that of the Missouri, is quicksand, ever changing and ever dangerous. Excuse me. While the water will not average over 2 feet in depth in any place for a distance of 500 feet along its bank. That doesn't sound too good. If the bottom was rocked and the banks precipitous, a line of steamers would pay well, but as it is, no sensible capitalist will invest his money in a single boat. Kansas is destined by nature to be the railroad state. And this is 1855. I mean, it's pretty forward thinking. The railroads in 1855 were just starting to snake across Missouri. The Hannibal line, and then the one from St. Louis heading towards Jefferson City, but they weren't even built yet. They're already talking railroads out here. So let's see if this guy turned out to be right. Here's the map of the Kansas River, and what I think is neat, I saw that on Google, is that it's the largest prairie-based river system in the world. I didn't know that. I mean, that's pretty cool that the Kansas has that in its credit. The red line there is the Kansas River, and then the tributaries are in blue. Big Blue, Little Blue, Republican, Solomons, Saline, and Smoky Hill. The Arkansas is on there, but it's not a tributary. In the early 1850s, these are the major ports: Westport, Lawrence, Lecompton, Topeka, Manhattan, and kind of Fort Riley. Leavenworth and Atchison are river ports, but they're up along the Missouri River. So that gives you a frame of reference to the river we're going to talk about. Kansas River, 184 miles long. Not bad. Currently, this is a modern statistic here. 18 dams and weirs. If you drive across the bridge, you see those little, looks like a line of rocks. That's the gear. It's 6 railroad bridges and then 33 bridges of other various types. Throughout its history, the Kansas River has never had any Corps of Engineer navigation support. The Corps of Engineers, when they work out here, they're under flood control, erosion control, that kind of thing. Maybe other things like wildlife preservation and so forth. So currently, the Kansas River is in a semi-wild state, which means that there's a couple things that the Corps of Engineers or other people will do for the river, but basically the people in the state of Kansas and people along the banks have left it alone. And it's kind of neat. And in the conservationist type frame of mind, I think that's great. We have just leave it alone and let wildlife do its thing. And that's what we have here in our state. In 1864, the state of Kansas declared it non-navigable. And we'll get into a little bit more details, but I'll give you a spoiler here, it's because of railroads. If you put a bridge across the Kansas River, you're never gonna go steamboat through that. So Kansas formally made it, declared it non-navigable to keep steamboats from complaining about bridges and all the other things. They reopened navigation in 1913, formally by the state legislature. But nothing came of it. There was no further development in that regard. You wouldn't think that Topeka state legislature would waste its time, would you? Okay, Call River navigation. Even a love boat can't figure this one out. It's got to start. That's kind of an overhead view of it. Look, any of you have a motorboat or do boating at all? Kayak? You could probably go through that. But if you had a boat of any size, many of you are probably familiar with the Arabian. We'll talk about the Arabian a little bit. Where do you go? That's the Kansas River. I mean, that's just one shot of it, but there's several others. The characteristics of it is it's shallow, narrow, sharp turns, sandbars, and snags. We'll check out the Arabian. Big old snag, one of those things down there in the bottom, big old root ball. Big chunk of, I think it's cottonwood, but a big old chunk went right through the hull. That's what took out the Arabian. But just looking at kind of a ground level here, if you're gonna put a big boat up this river, looking pretty chancy. If you spend some bucks on a boat, you sometimes if there's a guy here that says, oh yeah, I have a boat. How fast can you hit a sandbar without damaging your boat? He's just like 2 miles an hour. I mean, it will, sandbar will be bad. And most, the steamboats at the time, the rivers are pretty deadly. There's an average steamboat, the life of one's about 4 years old. And we see a lot of steamboats in the movie. We see steamboats in the movies and such, and they have these grand ballroom looking things and glass cathedral, mirrors and all rugs, all this fancy stuff. The 99% of the steamboats did not have those. Those were excursion boats for the most part that we think of as river steamboats. They're freighters. Think of barges, tugboats, that kind of thing. That's pretty basic stuff. One of the reasons they didn't put that kind of money into an average boat is that chances are it's going to blow up, sink, or burn in 4 years. So that kind of money you just didn't put into that. It's like buying a Maserati and taking it out on the dunes, on the grind. Yeah, there's always somebody in here that does it. Okay, here's a couple overhead. This is down by Westport. Just an overhead of where are you going to go with your boat? And if you're at ground level, you're not going to see a lot of this stuff. So it looks like I'm supposed to stay here, but on the kind of the east side of the river there, looks like that's the main channel, but it gets pinched off there pretty quick. And in the 1850s, there's no dredging going on. There's no Corps of Engineer work going on. So you just got to take your chances. Here's Lecompton. Doesn't look a whole lot better. A lot of sandbars, hard to find out where the main channel is, if there is one. And of course, I have to throw in Topeka. Yeah, some of the sandbars are sticking out of the river. There's some that you can see there that are kind of submerged. And if you're on a boat, even in the pilot house of a steamboat kind of looking down, you might not see that thing. You might think that's pretty clear water and hit right into it. So not looking good, is it? This is actually up further north. This is a painting by Carl Bodmer, but it gives a good illustration of what the rivers look like at that time. Any guess on what kind of trees those are sticking out of the water?
Dogwood.
Cottonwood. Cottonwood loves the rivers, and that's where they grow. Do you have any cottonwood furniture at home? Oh boy, we got a new dining room table. It's made of cottonwood. No, probably not. Cottonwood, yes, sir.
You can go
on with your story on, what is the draft on a steam?
We'll get to that, but yes, average draft is 4 feet, 4 feet. And they're working with 2. Okay. So when the cottonwoods, because they live on the river, what will often happen during the flood is that they'll get washed into the river, and that's what they die. And otherwise, or sometimes they get, water will come to a level and then just drown them out, so the cottonwoods will die, but leaving that. So you got a little steamboat there trying to navigate through that. And trees in the river are kind of like icebergs. You see part of it, but there's a whole bunch of it still underneath the water. So coming up on a gauntlet like that, I mean, it takes a brave man to pilot his boat through all that stuff. Some other navigation hazards for steamboats on the Kansas River are flatboats. In the lower corner there, most of the people living along the river, they're taking their goods to market. Let's say you have a farm around here in Topeka, and hey, we got a good crop of grain. Well, let's make a flatboat. Guess what it's made of? Cottonwood, yeah. And then they sail down, they kind of float down the river and either walk or, you know, hitch a ride back home. But if you're a steamboat and you get a couple dozen of these things in your way, that's another obstacle. They're going to be, those guys are a lot more maneuverable, so they'll get out of their way as best they can. But you're going to get yelled at. You're probably cursed, and maybe a gunshot or 2. The flatboat guys don't want to see the steamboats on the river. The other one is ferries, and this is one picture that one is a kind of famous one from Lecompton area. But there are a couple of ferries operating here in the Topeka area, North Topeka, and then here. You can see the ropes there, and one of the popular culture references I use is Outlaw Josie Wells, where you have the flatboat and the ferry, 10 cents, you know, get it on across. That requires a rope or a chain, usually a rope, strung across the river. And if a steamboat comes up, hey, we need to get through, that means they got to dismantle their ferry. They're not going to be real happy to do that. And if the steamboat tries to go over it anyway, the rope can get caught up in the paddle wheels and cause another problem. So ferries are they're a hazard to steamboat navigation. And the ferries also have a license from the state, so they come here up to Topeka way and start complaining about steamboats. So now they got a legal problem. So that's another little hazard to navigation going on here. Here's another picture here. This one's in Westport area, which is now Kansas City. But just real briefly on the ferry is you take a wagon and 2 of the animals across, get it up on the bank, the ferry will go back and get the other team, either 2 or 4 animals, and bring them over. So it usually took 2 trips per wagon to get them over. And it wasn't just 10 cents, it was like 25 cents an axle, and it was like going to the toll booth here on the turnpike, which I had to do today. Thank you very much. Just another picture. The ferry and a couple of steamboats. Now look at the steamboats in the background. This is after the Civil War, but look at the size of them. If you're familiar with the Arabia, these are tiny little things, and there's a reason for that. If you're going to come up the Kansas River, you can't bring up a boat like the Arabia. It's way too big. So it's the little guys here, and you can tell it's after the Civil War because pushing barges or anything in front was just not done yet. If you did have a barge, you'd tow it from behind. Well, another thing, the federal government's involved with the Kansas River too. Here, this is a much later picture. This is probably turn of the century at Fort Riley pontoon bridge. Now let's say General Sumner is going to go march against the Cheyenne out there, and he brings a bridge along. He puts up a bridge across the Kansas River to get across. Do you think a steamboat coming up, hey General, we need you to move your bridge? How do you think that's going to work very well? We're the federal government. Get out of here. Okay, the steamboats. So we talked about the river and the characteristics. It doesn't look real good, does it? The steamboats operating in the Kansas River. Here's Arabia. Gives you a kind of a size comparison here. Right up front, the Arabian's too big to get up the Kansas River. It is, and they had a 4-foot draft, but we're dealing with 2-foot draft on normal, and then you have to wait for, what you have to do is wait for a big rain to come up, and to have any chance at all. And, if you do have a sandbar, what you do, there's a couple ways to do it. It's called grasshoppering. For one, there's a series of poles and such that you work with the boat and the machinery to drag yourself over the sandbar. Another way is to tie to cottonwood trees or put an anchor out there and use the capstan, which is usually to haul up an anchor. Use that to drag your boat across the sandbar, and that's usually for emergencies. That's not something they wanted to do as a common thing, because it just rips the bottom of your boat. And if, okay, it's nice sandbar, well, this is a rock or a cottonwood stump in there. You could easily, as you're pulling it, you just rip the bottom out of your boat, and then you're really in trouble. For the boats, general characteristics, much smaller on the Mississippi and Missouri. The boats operating up the Missouri River and around Westport and trying to come up the Kansas River, much smaller. We're carrying freight 100 tons or less, depending on the size of the boat. Now, it sounds 100 tons sounds like a lot, but really it isn't. That's not much, and you're trying to make money doing it. Your cost profit margin is very, very thin. Boats themselves are by nature fuel efficient. The boats on the Mississippi are burning about a ton of coal per day. That's a lot of fuel, and you have to have boats on the Mississippi and Ohio. They have that balancing act too. You have to carry enough fuel to get through your day or make a lot of stops, which adds time to your trip, or you carry less fuel and you carry more cargo. So there's that balancing act that they have going on there. All boats on all the rivers have seasonal limitations. The wintertime, like from November to February, March, even on the Mississippi and Ohio, most boats aren't really operating unless it's a very short point A to point B. St. Louis to Keokuk, for instance, most of them are not operating. They also have ice flows and ice chunks that'll bang up your boat pretty good too. So seasonal limitations out here in Kansas. Yeah, we get rain, but you know how it is. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't. So the guys that wanted to bring up boats up to Kansas had to wait for that high water, and it didn't last that long. Weather and light limitations, unlike Mark Twain, you all know Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. He wrote an autobiography, and he talked about his life as a steamboat pilot, and talked about traveling at night and all sorts of weather. Didn't really happen. Mark Twain was embellishing quite a bit. If you cannot see the pilot house and see the river and see the hazards, the snacks, the sandbars and all that, you didn't travel. Whether it's fog, rain, there's no windshield wipers on a steamboat. You got to get somebody out on the prow of the boat and yell back up to the pilot house if they saw anything. Light. Later on, after the war, they put some of the lights on. Arabia had one and it was run by kerosene, but they didn't shine that bright and they didn't shine that far. So it was, if the weather was bad and it was dark, foggy, something, you just didn't go. It wasn't worth the loss of your boat. Boats by themselves were accident prone. Might take a guess what took most of the boats out. There's three guesses right there. Well, this is a big one. And depending on how you break it down, fire is the official fire. All the guys were smoking. There are oil lamps, candles, and all sorts on there. The boilers themselves would often cause the fires. The pipes would get real hot and set the boat on fire. The boilers, they like to explode. They were made to take about 180 pounds per square inch. I think that's a lot, but talk to a boiler maker, that's nothing. 180 pounds. But back then, when you made a boiler, they didn't weld them together. They didn't have the means to weld. They bolted them together. And this is basically cast iron. If you have a cast iron stove and you know how fragile those things could be, you could try to move it from one room to another, drop it, and the thing would shout. Or rolled iron as well. But either rolled or cast, they were very fragile things, and they're running at very hot temperatures. And bolted together. And if one developed through either corrosion or such, little pinhole, what they would do is take a wood peg, sharpen it down a little bit, and nail it into the boiler, and that would be their fix. So highly maintenance intensive, and they're absolutely unsafe. When a boiler exploded, you're on the main deck, and as it exploded, everyone up in the fancy parlor, up in the pilot house, and the Texas deck, probably are gone. They're dead. When you're sinking and the boiler hits the water, the rapid cooling of the boiler will cause an explosion. So, in theory, you could catch fire, start to sink, and then explode. And that's after you ran aground on something. So it was a very chancy thing getting on a steamboat. And I said, well, I'll just take the train. The trains did the same thing. They like to explode too. And they like to catch fire. They didn't even run aground, but they could jump a track. So training steamboats in the 50s and 60s was a very dangerous proposition. They get on them. They're very convenient when they work. Yes, sir.
Singers in the smoke could also lead to.
Yes,
fire.
indeed. There are a number of accidents, not only on steamboats, on trains. The cinders that come up, particularly if you're burning crummy wood, cottonwood. That stuff would come out in cinders and drop back down on the boat or the train. And the train cars were made of wood, and they'd start fires that way. We didn't talk too much about coal fuel. I'll just say I think it might be a little later on, but cottonwood is a crummy fuel. The most common thing that we see cottonwood in today is pallets. Those pallets, you go to Sam's Club and they have pallets and there's stuff on them. Those pallets are cottonwood. Now, if you played around with those at all, I said, think about burning them. It doesn't burn well. It doesn't make much heat, and it's dirty. And if you're going to play around in the Kansas River, you need to bring coal. The problem is there's not much coal around here, not many coal mines operating at that time. So they got what they could from Westport, and then they tried to make their way up. And when they ran out of coal, they either had to start mixing it or put ashore and get some guys with a bunch of axes and saws and start chopping up wood. And that takes away from your travel time, which adds to your cost. So general characteristics, there are no established steamboat lines from Westport up to Kansas City. And we'll get into the boat travels here in just a moment, but it was, hey, I got a great idea. I got a consignment for Manhattan. And well, that sounds great. We can make some money here. Okay, let's go. And it was that one-time deal thing going on here. There's no, hey, I'm going to establish a line. Every Tuesday, we're going to go upriver. It just didn't happen, unfortunately. This boat would not get up the river, but it's typical of what would try. This is the Far West. This is actually a post-Civil War picture. Look at the deck, the main deck. Look at all the wood. As I mentioned before, there's that balancing act of cargo versus fuel. The more cargo you carry, the more money you can make, and make a profit, make it a viable business. When you put all that kind of wood on there, it takes away from the cargo. So, putting all that wood, and you're able to carry a box of hats. I got some hats for sale, $500 a piece, and I might be able to break even. That's not balancing that. So, and that's about the size of the boats that I'll actually start naming here. This is about the size that we're trying to get up there. These things were 4 feet, 3 feet draft, and they're the only ones that had a chance to get up here. Here's another one. This is a Civil War picture called the Lookout. It's a little packet. No fuel on this one. I imagine they're going to start loading up. But this is the size of the boats. And if you think of the ones like in the movies, you get these big old boats and excursion boats. Those are on the Mississippi, and they could not even they had trouble, those boats probably would have a hard time getting up the Missouri River up to Kansas City. And certainly up to Kansas, it just wasn't gonna happen.
How long is that?
So again, sir,
How long was and wide was the boat there?
if I heard you, how long was the ride?
No, how long and
Size of the
wide
boat.
is the boat?
Okay, a typical boat was 140 feet and 20 or 30 feet wide. Good question. Here's one, this is post-war as well. This is what's called a mountain boat. And if I put this up here because if I had the means to buy a steamboat back then and to operate one, that's the boat I would buy for the Kansas River. Something like that. And then I would put a barge behind it and tow it. That's what should be. The guys that tried to come up here weren't thinking that way. But here are the known steamboats on the Kansas River, and I got this by going through a bunch of stuff on the Kansas Historical Society. The first one was called the Excel, 1854. And it was one of those like the Lookout. It was kind of small. It got up the Missouri River in the past, and they thought they'd give it a shot. The papers in Westport announced, hey, it's leaving, and then a couple days later, they say, hey, it came back, and they went all the way to Manhattan and back in 24 hours. Didn't happen. These things, maybe 5 miles an hour. If you work out that 180 miles up to Manhattan and all the way back and do a little math, they didn't make it all the way to Manhattan. I don't know where they went. They didn't make it up there, but that is Kansas' first steamboat to go up the river. The next, if you look at the years here, like 1854, just one, 1855, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Am I counting right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 boats, 6 boats, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 boats try to get up the Kansas River. And some did, with varying degrees of success. But they didn't make it all the way up. I mean, if you went to, let's say, Westport to Lawrence, that counts. You got it. And a side note about Lawrence, when they founded that town, they looked at the river and said, hey, this is great. We have a river here. We can use steamboats and get our stuff in and out. They found out very quickly, Lawrence did, no, we can't do that. We ended up, and it really curtailed the development of Lawrence. Well, it curtailed development of all towns along the river, but they had really hoped and planned to use the Kansas River for steamboat trading. It didn't happen for them. The Hartford, I like this story because it's kind of a success, half a success. They made it all the way to Manhattan, which is pretty cool. And they had those prefabricated homes like the Arabia did. You know, you go to Sears and Roebuck and get a home. It's prefab. You put it together, and then you could build on it later. But it got all the way to Manhattan. Unfortunately, just short of Manhattan, it got stuck on sandbar. The people got their stuff, but the boat was stuck, and it was. This is a boat on the sandbar. This is not very flexible. Can you imagine? The bottom would sag out and break, or the ends would sag and break here. The boat was a total loss. But what happened? Kansas being enterprising people, they stripped it bare. The lumber went to building a number of homes and things in Manhattan. The ship's bell went to the Methodist Church. I don't know if it's still there or what happened to it, but they got the church, the ship bell, put it in the church. The machinery, they used it for a wood mill, a sawmill, excuse me. They used it as a sawmill up there. So, yeah, they stripped the Hartford. Kind of a success story. I hope it was insured. A lot of boats were not insured, by the way. Once we made a couple runs, the boat was paid for, and why do you need insurance? It costs too much. 56 is another banner year. 1, 2, 3, 4 boats. I guess they learned from all the mistakes of 55. I'm not going up there. So four boats went up in 56. Lightfoot of Quindaro, I have that highlighted because that is Kansas's first made in Kansas steamboat, by golly. And Quindaro is a ghost town now, but Kansas City, Kansas is just north of that along the river. It was a free state town and, on the Underground Railroad too. A number of African Americans settled there. But they built the boat there. The machinery came from Indiana, but they built the boat in Kansas. Kansas is first. Okay. So you see now we're gonna get 57, 58, 1, 2, 3, 2 or 3 and 57, 1, 2, 2 and 58, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 59. And then you look at the Star of the West, 61, 2, 3, 4, 4 in 1960. So those people are trying to get up here. They're trying to find a way. They're trying to make a buck, but they're also trying to the settlers up and the produce and commerce down. Get it to Westport and sell it out. Looks though that something changed here. From 1860 to 1864, men tried to come up here. Why would that be? Okay. Well, obviously the Civil War is going on, and if you look at the Missouri River statistics, they don't go down to 0, but they go down a lot. It's just a shadow of the former self. Steamboats are great when they work, but they don't like Confederate cannonballs. They don't like Confederate raiders and such. So most of the boats, they went down to St. Louis and they either sold or leased to the Army, Union Army, or they were sold and scrapped for that period of the Civil War. So you won't see steamboats on the Kansas River at all during the Civil War. Yes, sir.
Did these boats evolve during this time, or is it the same type of boat?
It's the same boat. They were kind of headstrong. Hey, I got a boat. You know, they didn't build one for the purpose of the Kansas River. So they're trying to get these big lunking boats, shove them upriver. They weren't stupid about it. They got the smallest, lightest ones they could, but like that Undine I showed, the little one, they never got to that point here on the river. They always try to get the big ones. Yes, sir.
What's the story on the Lizzie there?
The Lizzie?
9-year period.
If it's not highlighted, like I said, they tried to get up here. They're
You try each of those years, so 1855.
It's got a 9-year life.
yeah, just like the Star of the West. Oh, let me, if I think I understood you, because I don't hear well. Like the Star of the West, it has a double year. They got up here when the water was high, the water dropped out, and then they had to wait 4 months to go home.
But that's 9 years there.
Right below the Hartford.
Under Hartford.
No, that's Star of the West, 1859 to 1860.
Under Hartford,
Underneath Hartford.
Okay, I might have,
1855 to
61
64.
now.
that's a typo. I'm sorry. That's a typo.
Okay.
Good question, and I've given this a number of times. You're the first one to point that out. Have a cinnamon roll. I'll give you a Daniel Webster cigar if I have it. The last one is highlighted, Alexander Major's 1866. Really, it's like all the others that had limited success, but it was the last steamboat recorded coming up the Kansas River in 1866. And if there won't be a quiz, but by golly, there should be. If you remember in 1864, Kansas said it's not navigable. But they came up anyway. People ignoring the legislature of Kansas, I've never heard of that. You know, all of these, depending on when the Tom Morgan, Emma and all that, whenever that legislation was made, I don't know. But the 65s in 1866, they came up here basically in violation. But it really, I don't think anybody really cared except the flatboat men and the ferry guys. And I don't know how far up they got. So if they just went to Lawrence, Lecompton, maybe here to Topeka, they weren't interfering with the Fort Riley or anything, so that'd be okay. But those are the known ones. There might be more that just weren't recorded. And these were recorded on the Kansas State Historical Society, their website, and also here in lovely Topeka. A lot of them are just brief mentions, hey, the Emma showed up at the newspaper, Emma showed up here with not much else with fanfare. Some were just listed as a reminiscence of a guy saying, yeah, I remember these appeared this year. So I'm not gonna say that list is absolutely complete, but it's about as close as we're gonna get. Some boats were seen, you know, a lot of fanfare, let's have a parade, others, another steamboat.
So how?
Yes, sir.
Did they have information of how far each one of these got?
How far they went?
How far they went up the river?
The Hartford was probably Manhattan, you know, they had high hopes, the Army had high hopes to get steamboats all the way to Fort Riley. Because otherwise they're using Russell Major Waddell, the shipping firm. And the boats that come to Leavenworth dump supplies off. And then they'd have to haul it by oxen or mule all the way to Riley. They were very hopeful. They tried it, the Army tried it a couple times and found that they were unreliable, the steamboats were unreliable, so they just kind of gave up on it. And that was early on in the 1855-56 period. Never really seemed to have tried again to use steamboats. So when the boats were trying to go up the river, they were trying to get at least to Manhattan. That was really the gold standard. If they get to Manhattan, they can make some money. Unless they just had a consignment for, let's say, Lawrence that filled the boat. Then they can make out the Lawrence and make their money and go home. But if you were gonna pick up what they called pile sacks, it's where a farmer, hey, I got a good crop of corn this year. And he puts his sacks of corn by the river, he puts a little sign on it, and probably a little collection box. But anyway, it was all on an honor system. It worked on the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio River. The boats would stop, pick the stuff up, and leave money, and then take that and sell it. It was like a consignment. So if they were going to make, I'm glad you're here. You're producing some thought here that I normally wouldn't have. But with the steamboats so irregular, if only you have 4 or 5 a year, it's kind of hard as a farmer. Like, do I put this stuff out or not? You know, I put my corn out here, the deer are going to get it. You know? Or the river's going to rise and flood, and I'll lose my crop. So Kansas will end up, because the steamboats just did not pan out like they had hoped, we'll be using wagons, flatboats, and such to get the produce to market. But they don't sell locally, they want to make some more money and send it down to Kansas City. Let's see, anyway, I'll go. This is kind of my ending here. This is from the Symphony in the Flint Hills. I was honored to be asked to write an article, and it's in last summer's here, and I think I might have been doing the alcohol thing that night. Anyway, today the cause harnessed by dams, crossed by dozens of bridges, rendering commercial river traffic a distant memory. These structures, though, make a sportsman's dream come true. Boating and fishing remain quite popular along the river's entire length. The Kaw River never became a commercial transportation success, but still provides power generation, recreation, and life-giving water to the more than 600,000 people living along its length. Its untamed nature remains and serves as a reminder of our rich Kansas history. The Kansas River is a great river. I mean, it's pretty cool. But if you're looking for, you know, a rich steamboat history, it's there, but it's kind of thin. Let's see. See what I got here? Okay, question discussion. Even Steamboat Willie got me.
What is the farthest upstream they ever made it? Did they make it past Manhattan?
Very, very shortly beyond Manhattan. I don't recall the boat, but it's we're done. We can't get out of here. Because the river's so narrow, some of these boats had to back out a ways until they found a place that they could finally turn around. And if you look at the boats, whether it be a side wheeler or a stern wheeler, that's your means of propulsion. If you mess up, you know, you're really going to be in a little hurt and wreck up your paddles. Most of the boats of that era I just discussed from the 50s and 60s were these side wheelers like the Arabia. That's what the vast majority was. During the Civil War and after is when the stern wheeler came into vogue. You're gonna ask a technical question, why is that? The side wheelers are kind of neat because if you want to make a real tight turn, you could reverse one wheel and one forward, put the rudder in, and you could turn on a dime. And that was really handy in a number of places, not only in this river, but all the rivers. Before the Corps of Engineers straightened out in Missouri and Mississippi. The stern wheelers were neat because you get a wider hull to them. You don't have the side wheels are taking up hull space. So you have a much narrower hull, so you can't carry as much. But the stern wheelers, you have a wider hull, you have propulsion in the back, it's a little bit more protected, the hull protects it. The problem was steering. And when they first designed those things, the rudder, if this is the hull of the boat and here's the wheel, the rudder was between the hull and the wheel. And there was not enough water flowing over the rudder to make it that effective. What they did is they ended up, we'll keep this rudder here, but on the back side of the wheels, we'll put rudders back there too. So you have, if you look at a stern wheel boat, there's 2 or 4 rudders back there. There's 1 or 2 between the hull and the wheel, and 2 more behind, 1 or 2 more behind the wheel. So when they figured that out, and that was in the early 1860s, the stern wheelers came in very popular. And Union gunboats, when they took a steamboat or built one, purpose built for a gunboat, but they liked the stern wheelers because they proved to be as maneuverable as the side wheelers. And because the paddle wheels aren't on the side of your boat sticking out but not a target, and you could put more guns on the boat themselves, on the hull. So Union Army liked the stern wheelers and they gained popularity. I was gonna say they're mechanically simpler, but that's not really true. But you don't see side wheelers anymore. When you go book a trip on the Delta Queen or one of those other boats in that company, or you go to Hannibal and see the Mark Twain or some of these other excursion boats, they're all stern wheelers. And so the side wheel paddle boats are pretty much gone. Side note, on the Great Lakes, the side wheelers stayed popular for a while. In fact, World War II history, USS Wolverine and what was the other one? Sable, anyway, they were aircraft carriers for training. They converted side wheel steamboats into an aircraft carrier to train on the Great Lakes. So they were still around, but they were the big boys up on the Great Lakes and not on the river.
I was gonna say, on some of those years where there were more frequent attempts, it could have been wetter seasons for more higher runoff.
Okay.
And also, early on, you said the Kansas River has a number of dams and weirs. Well, I know where the weirs are, but I'm not familiar with where there were dams per se.
Well, example
Yeah,
one
Lawrence
is,
has that.
example one, the big one is in Lawrence, and it's where the power station. But
Yeah.
look at it, you have to kind of pay close attention that there's a dam there. It's probably only 10 feet high. It's not like the Hoover Dam where it's, there's a great big dam there. Some of them are essentially the water rushes over.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
those are weirs.
Yeah, and then
But
so there's a number of those around that. Yeah, they're there, but you don't see them. I didn't put it in the briefing slide, but there's you Google dams on the Kansas River, the Google map will come up. It has them all there, and when you're looking at them like the overhead shots, yeah, they're a dam, but and some of them it's on the river, but there's a stream coming in. They dam it, right? It's on the dam's on the Kansas River, but it's holding back the water from a tributary. Yeah, I had to add Steamboat Willie there.
The river's also been within a few years ago designated as a national recreation river.
Yes. And it goes back to that semi-wild state that the number of recreation areas along the river. I think Kansas, I'm real pleased with the way Kansas has treated this river. The Illinois River comes to mind. It's just full of silt, Asian carp. It's just chemical spills. It's an industrial mess. And it's basically a dead river. Where the Kansas River's living, it's a living, breathing river. We really take care of it. Yes, sir.
So we talked about seasonal changes as far as the water level. But what are the rules and the laws about extraction of water for irrigation and this sort of thing?
That I have no idea. I don't know.
Does that make a big difference over time?
Well, at the time in the 1850s and 60s, irrigation extraction was by the bucket.
Historically?
I don't think much really extracted from the river per se as the tributaries along it. If you had your homestead along a stream or the Delaware River, it used to be called the Grasshopper River. I think that's where, where water might get diverted. But in this period, I don't think there are any laws about it.
The most of extraction from Kansas River are probably drinking water supplies like Topeka and Lawrence and wherever it goes.
Let me ask one kind of commercial question. You wrote a couple historical fiction books on steamboats. Why don't you talk about those and then we'll adjourn.
Okay, back in 2004, I wrote a campaign analysis on the Fort Donelson campaign. I used to write, and that's nonfiction. That's purely historical. I retired. I don't know what I think. 6 years ago from the Combat Studies Institute in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And what I wanted to do was branch out and do something fun for once. I'm not writing for somebody else. I'm writing for myself. So the Steamboat Seasons and Backwater Battles was my first attempt. I think it's a fun story. Some people love it. Some people say, wow, that was long and tedious. Well, the sequel to that is Steamboat Seasons, where that takes place during the war and Dawn of a New Era is after the war. It goes for a year or two. Ride to Oblivion, I really like that one. It's a Sterling Price raid in the Missouri 1864. It's also a historical novel. All 5 of those are historical novels, but all of them are based on real history. It's just not some cooked up story. The hero of the story, Princess Gone to Kansas, 1855. Young man comes from St. Louis, broken family, comes out here. He gets hired on to go down the Santa Fe Trail and back. And when he comes back, he works for Major Russells and Waddell, the freighting firm. And the reason I chose that kind of on all of this for the steamboats in this one, they're based on transportation. That's their occupation. Is that I could take that character and put them in different places. Gone to Kansas 56 is a sequel to the first one. Our young hero finds himself at the Battle of Blackjack. He finds himself in Lecompton during the big standoff at the cabin fight. Because he's a Teamster, he travels with the Army or he travels on, so he has a number of adventures. He's just not stuck in Leavenworth, for instance, and any small town after a while, you run out of things to write about. There's just not everything happening, but that's what I like about that. Ride to Oblivion, I'm a Union man myself, but that's actually a guy that joins the Confederate Army. And he follows Sterling Price, severely wounded, and he finds himself many of adventures. But again, they're based on real history. The events that you see, the big view of it, the Battle of Pilot Mountain, yes, it's a Battle of Pilot Mountain. And you see from his perspective of what's going on there. So I'm real happy with all of them. The first one being my first, times I wish I could go back and rewrite a few things, but all in all, I'm real happy with them. I'm kind of in a writer's block moving and all that. I want to either extend the Gone to Kansas or extend the Steamboat Seasons to bring them to a complete conclusion.
People here can ask, but for those on the Zoom, can you give your email address if people wanted to?
What I am not set up to sell books, but the best deal you can get on them is go to Amazon. If you remember my name, type my name in there and they'll pop right up. And some of the other things too, that if you see something from the Combat Studies Institute, don't spend a dime on it. You can email the Combat Studies Institute, they'll send it to you for free. The government books. Yes, sir.
So how did you get the fascination with steamboats? What is?
I don't, you know, I wish I had a nice answer for you. I just think they're neat. You know, for their day, they were a technological marvel. Yeah, you take away the steamboats and then later the trains. The technology of moving stuff is the same as the Romans. You put a wagon and then get some animals to haul it. The steamboat was, it was the computer of its day, the 8-track tape player of its day. Mechanical marvel, and they're neat, they're fun. Who doesn't like steamboats? They're fun. Yes, sir.
I'm from Southwest Pennsylvania and I'm not Monongahela River, so I figure,
Yeah.
right near the Monongahela.
Yeah, they
River,
went-
and,
Those boats went all the way to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. See
Yeah.
the paddle wheelers
They're-
rolling up.
Yeah, sure. But again, they're fun. They're, and you could describe, there are a lot of things, mishaps and other adventures on those boats just by being on the dang boat. You know, oh, there's a fire. Oh, we hit a snag. Oh, the boiler exploded. What fun. So that part was pretty easy. The first one, Steamboat Seasons, very briefly. A young man works as a deckhand, works his way up to be a pilot. And his boat, the company sells his boat to the Union Army, Navy, and they convert it into a gunboat. And he spends 4 years on the river as a pilot of this gunboat. At the very end, he makes captain for the company. The war's over, the captain promotes, the company promotes him to captain. And a whole nother slew of adventures happens. He has a love interest going on in there, something I'm not really comfortable writing about. Had to do it for the audience, you know. So, and then the Steamboat Seasons, Dawn of a New Era, continues that. And he ends up not only on the Eastern Rivers, what we would call them, but he also goes up to Missouri. And so yes, they were both fun to write. Yes, sir.
The first book, Where the South Lost War, was that where Grant was in command to capture those forts?
Yes.
Do you tie, and I realize that it's fiction, does he use those speedboats at Vicksburg, Vicksburg, part of the second book? Or is it
Steamboat Seasons,
parts?
Steamboat Seasons is the first battle is Fort Henry, Fort Donelson.
Really?
And he's on his boat is still a freighter at that time,
Oh, okay.
but you can see his perspective. And yeah, that guy Grant is supposedly coming down. I mean, Grant's not famous yet, so a
Yeah,
lot
right,
of references to Grant, guy Grant. The boat also goes to keep on the Grant in Vicksburg.
Yeah.
So, but he's on the freighter, but he's on the boat and you can see the bombardment and you can see
Wow.
his boat was destined to make the run past the batteries at Vicksburg. But his boat and a couple other boats were held back. They got cold feet. But he's watching on the pilot house as they're making their run. And that guy Grant is on the boat behind him with his wife watching. So he's smoking a cigar
Okay.
behind him. So, yeah, that was a fun one to write. The Gone Kansas series, are you familiar with the band Kansas?
Yeah.
Obviously,
Just a little.
there's some Easter eggs in there with, oh my, let's see, not.
Dust in the wind.
Well, there's a rough, yeah, we're just dust in the wind, dude. Geez, I do. The violin player. Lofgren?
Robbie Steinhardt.
Harry Logan.
Steinhardt is a minor character and the guy's name is Steinhardt.
Yeah.
So there's a number of, Livgren is also another minor character. So there's little Easter eggs placed in there. Talking about someday of the state motto, and, oh man, everything's so darn difficult here, you know. So putting those things in was kind of fun, and the good people of Kansas will instantly recognize some of them, get a chuckle, and the rest of the people will wallow in their ignorance and they'll keep reading. So that's it. I mean, I invite you to, take a look at them, consider them. I'm a horrible salesman. I am not set up for wholesale collection of books. When I do bring books, my apologies, they're in a big box. I've gotten them from Amazon and I'm just gonna.
Let's give Kendall a round of applause. My wife will tell you, and I will demonstrate today why I'm an idiot. I heard that the Chiefs would be playing at 3 o'clock. But that's 3 o'clock Eastern time, so we moved this up an hour. So that's why some of you have missed part of the Chiefs game. David had the score, but I didn't want to see it because I'm going to go home and watch it. But before I do that, we do have a gift for Kendall. I'd like to give that to you. It's from our Prairie Glass.
Oh, my.
And
That's
it's a
beautiful.
replica of the Ritchie building.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
We appreciate it. I thought I read the second book, but I couldn't get the first one. For example, the Arabia Sinking is in the second book. I mean, it is a historical fiction and it is real world, so I would encourage you to get that. I guess I'm gonna have to go to Amazon to buy the first and donate it to the library, but I encourage you to support the author who's given of his time generously.
He's on board the Arabia one, so. There's a teaser because the year prior, he picked the Arabia up from Westport to Lebanon. So you figure, oh, is he gonna sink? He's gonna say, nope, he made it. The next year.
Yes.
So has the
Sure.
sinking site ever been revealed?
Has whatever been
The
revealed?
sinking site of the Arabian sinking, has it ever been revealed?
Oh, yeah.
They dug it up.
Yeah, I know they did, but they.
But it was-
The river has changed
The
course.
diggers didn't never reveal where they found it. That's right.
Oh, it's actual site, I don't know.
I think it was public at one time. People-
Yeah,
They probably told
as I
them.
recall, sure, they had they made a deal with the farmer, it was like, okay, you can start digging here, but I needed.
Well, I'm just recall from visiting the museum years ago. There was publicity around it and the people that recovered it never said where they found it.
No, I don't know, I guess they don't want people traipsing around out there, it's private property, that or they don't know, they don't wanna tell you. If I don't know, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
That I don't.
There are cinnamon rolls left if you didn't get one and would like one, but
Yeah, cinnamon rolls,
come up, talk to Kendall, other questions. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay. I have a question on the second part.
Okay.
If you don't complete it.
Here we go,
Complete it. Yeah. Thank you. He was shot about it.
Gold dust guy? It doesn't really, it wasn't the cap.
I couldn't read for there.
Sure, it wasn't the cap.